So Stacey is an associate professor at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, where he teaches graphic design. He's just become an associate professor, is that right? So big round of applause. He spent the pandemic at Harvard as a NAS fellow and did Sankofa-topia, creating Black utopia through hip hop. And we had a wonderful conversation at lunch about how his entire way of working changed as a result of this in the most wonderful way. So I hope I can ask you that question if you don't share it. He also earned his undergraduate degree at Fayetteville State University and his MFA at the University of Buffalo, where he was an Arthur Schomburg Fellow. He is an Afrofuturist artist, and in his own words, he is creating a place where Black people are free from colonial influences. He illustrates the conflicts of integration, miseducation, unresolved slavery, unresolved emancipation, and Black people's lack of ability to self-organize and self-govern. He says, in this, I appropriate images of Black trauma to incite conversation to action and dismantle ideas of derogatory Black relations, passivity, and docility. He is also one of two people of the Black Kirby. He also works with John Jennings, who is going to be a guest here at some point in the very, very near future. So we're excited about that. So if you would like to see one half and then come and see the other half, we invite you to do that.
I'm the darker half.
Where they deconstruct the work of artist Jack Kirby to reimagine Black resistance spaces inspired by hip-hop, religion, the arts, and sciences. He is also the creator with writer Tony Medina of I Am Alfonso Jones, which you saw earlier. Thank you. And this was one of the first graphic novels for young readers to focus on police brutality and the Black Lives Matter movement. He's also the co-illustrator with John Jennings of Prison Industrial Complex for Beginners. So I want you all to give him a huge round of applause. We are so thrilled and privileged that he is here. Are you ready? All right, awesome.
All right, thank you, thank you. So thinking about the sensory aesthetics of Black liberation, right? I started thinking about what does Black liberation look like? What does it taste like, smell like, et cetera, right? I believe that, and what is our healing from colonial trauma? What does that look like, right? At 50, I am obsessed with the legacy that I'm going to leave. And I need to be able to address some certain things with my artwork and some burgeoning philosophies. And as you can see here, I'm gonna look at if you read the part in yellow here, I'm gonna talk about my record collection a little bit because this kind of jump-started the way that I'm thinking about this. Imagine that this is an artist talk of me figuring out, as I'm literally figuring out my, my burgeoning practice. I still call it a burgeoning practice. And as I'm figuring it out, I share that, right? If that makes sense. This is like an artist talk, okay? Cool. So I'm looking to define what is freedom? How am I thinking about that? But I'm really making this as an artist. So for me to answer questions or even begin to ask questions, I have to make art. Does that make sense? Any artists in the room? Does that make sense? All right. Oh, not enough hands up. All right. I will be recruiting you all later to join me on the iPad Pro, where you can draw on a program called Procreate. It's addictive. I'm recruiting artists. I'm a propaganda artist. So what is my purpose? I realized that I needed to create a purpose. I needed to write down what my purpose is. And my purpose is to establish my philosophy and theory by creating multimedia art that inspires us to think about free and equitable futures for all people, but beginning with Black people first. And the reason I say that is because we all know what DEI is, right? A DEI plus, right? Everything gets connected to anti-Blackness, right? And many times, just with some of the most amazing religions in the world and amazing cultures in the world, Black people get locked out of the things that we create and give to the world, right? I am not going to do that with my work, unapologetically. So I want to, I'll go back to this image in a moment. I believe that Black liberation is an algorithm. Hear me out. White supremacy is a philosophy. It's a philosophy, but it's backed by a system called racism, right? The philosophy backed by the system becomes design. Does that make sense? Therefore, the healing of colonial trauma, freedom, our liberation, in my thinking, has to be an algorithm that begins with a philosophy first, then is developed into a system that is designed and executed. Does that make sense? As a visual artist, this is what I'm looking at and exploring. And this abstraction here is me thinking about, this is an abstraction of me thinking about what does that algorithm look like through the aesthetics of hip hop. All right, but my practice kind of began through my love of hip hop and my obsession with original samples, right? So when I was a teenager, I had a Walkman. Everybody know what a Walkman is? Everybody remember a Walkman, right? You still have one? Oh, come on, right on, right on. I might get that from you. I might take that from you later. All right, if it disappears, it was not me, I promise you, all right? It was Deborah Willie right in front of you, okay? She took it, right? So imagine this, right? Here's this, I'm taking my Walkman to the record store, right? And I'm like, hey, can you help me? What is this sound? Dee-dee! And like, what is that? That 2 seconds, that dee-dee! Like, what is that, right? And I'm trying to figure out the original sample. At this time, I didn't know what crate digging was, right? But I was literally looking for original samples at the record store through these hip hop songs, right? I was collecting music at the same time. I was collecting vinyl. I still collect vinyl. I spin vinyl. I'm a DJ. I still spin vinyl. I was taking these, when I got these records, and these 3 records in particular were gifted to me in the bulk of my record collection through these 2 Black women, a mother and daughter, who are no longer with us now. But they entrusted me with their family's records. They're like, you collect vinyl? Why are you doing that? Wait, you're serious? Like, yeah, like this is what I'm doing. And they were like, and I'm like 19, 20 at the time, right? They're like, we want to give you our family's records. And there are records in this collection that totally changed the way that I looked at art in my art practice. So these records for these 2 Osabisa albums, for example, or this Kool and the Gang, Spirit of the Boogie album cover, these records, if you look at these aesthetics, these are Black liberation, these are Black fantasy, they're Black surrealism. I was absorbing this by hunting for original samples, but also enjoying the artwork that was changing me. So many of you may recognize the classic Miles Davis's Bitches Brew album cover, right? Or the Santana Abraxas album cover, or Parliament Motor Booty Affair album, which literally opens up into a gatefold that with a pop-up, right? That is an underground world, underwater city of Atlantis where Black people live. This is dopeness, right? And I'm imagining like I'm absorbing this as a teenager, right? These are shaping the way that I'm starting to think about this. Now we're talking about comics, right? But I was collecting comics too, but I was also listening to these records. For me, there's no difference in the art. One, it's just one extension of another. My art influence, my comic influence, this is some examples of this. And before I get into that, let me go back to this image. These are 3 images, collages. I'm inspired, one of my chief inspirations is Romare Bearden. How many of you know who Romare Bearden is? Not enough of you. Treat yourself. Romare Bearden. I believe he passed away in 1988, one of my favorite artists, amazing influence. If you see his work, you will see the influence of him in my work, right? I purposely shout out my ancestors, purposely shout out my inspiration. I want you to see who I'm influenced by in my work. That's Sankofa, the Ghanaian term meaning go back and get it, right? As we're proceeding into the future, we go back and we get our history, right? That has been stolen from us, hidden from us, commandeered from us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We purposely go and get our history. So I shout out my influences on my work. All right, these are 3 depictions of black angels. Why? Because at the same time as I'm making art and thinking about black identity, I'm also the child of grandparents and a mother who's Jehovah's Witness, right? I'm going to the Kingdom Hall and I'm opening up the books that they use for worship, and I am not in there. Images do not look like me, right? So I'm like, you know, as a teenager, I'm like, where am I at in the Bible, right? Where am I at? Am I important? Like, what does this mean for me? And as every black child, just like every black child who reads comic books comes to the realization that most of the people in the comic books do not look like them. Around age 12, I noticed that many times the superheroes were beating up on people who looked like me in the comic books, and I got tired of this. I'm like, yo, my friends are not these criminals. Why is every time there's a black person in here, right, they're a bad stereotype or getting beat up by my favorite superheroes? Started creating my own images. And this is me still creating some, all these images are from 2016 of me collaging from images that already exist. I like to see images and then recontextualize them to imagine a different narrative. But these are 3 black angels, and I'm like, what do our messengers as angels say to us? If the messengers angels are messengers of God, they carry the word to us, and they carry the word from us, then I imagine they need to understand our perspective, our words. So I started making these images. Once again, our liberation is an algorithm. So when I was at Harvard, COVID shut down half of my time there, and I thought it was an amazing opportunity. I don't look at it in regret at all. I look at it as a blessing, because my queen-size bed then became my office. Seriously, and it was an amazing time. I think that every backburning project, those who capitalized on the quarantine, if you capitalized on that, you're gonna propel yourself like a rubber band into the future. You're pulling yourself back. You were in the quarantine, right? But you shouldn't have been stagnant. Every back burner project that you would one day get to should have been a front burner project. And I learned how to cook through my mother-in-law, actually, who taught me how to cook on all eyes on the stove and then use the oven too, right? At the same time, I would watch her make these amazing meals in like 30 minutes. I'm like, how are you doing this? And she literally taught me how to cook slower food on the back burner, faster food on the front burner, and then there's a time when you switch them. I was like, that's what the back burner means. I was like, that's what that means, right? So the back burner project became my front burner project when I went to Harvard. So I started illustrating this book that I'm working on of 360 images. So I'm thinking 360 degrees, a full cipher, right? At 33 and a third revelations, right? Once again, rotations, right? Because I'm thinking like a DJ. And I'm thinking about the people that I was studying or who I am studying now or that I still plan to study who are shaping my thought in the mid to late 80s through the 90s. African historian John Henry Clark, for example, or psychologist Frances Cress Welsing, or sociologist Frantz Fanon, right? They're shaping my thought. I'm looking at them as these theorists, these thinkers that are shaping in my imagination what black liberation looks like. So I'm in the midst of drawing 360 people, the way that I'm thinking about what this looks like across multiple ways of thought. Okay, so I'm also looking at, these are some of the artists that have influenced me as well. Cynthia St. James, so you see it there at the bottom, Charles Bibbs that you see at the top, and then Emory Douglas, the Minister of Culture for the Black Panther Party. I'm looking at political manifestos as well. And if you look at point 6 and 9 in this manifesto, 6 says to create art of social concerns that even a child can understand. This is my mission with my artwork. Even if you don't understand every nuance or pop cultural reference, there's something that you can grasp that resonates with you. Because I am a graphic designer and I am damn good at graphic designing. I can't make you like my work, but I can make you pay attention to it because I know the science, right? Point 9 says to create art that challenges the colonization of the imagination. I believe that in order for black people to be free, I actually argue that the only place that black people can actually be free is inside the decolonized black imagination. Because every space, I got some snaps in the back, shouts out, right? Because every time a black space is made physical, what happens to it? What happens to it? Co-opted. It is co-opted, it is destroyed, the culture is gentrified, etc. Right? Y'all gotta talk to me, y'all. All right. I'm also looking at the Black Panther Party 10-point program, where points 1, for example, we want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our black community. Point 7, we want an immediate end to police brutality and the murder of black people. And point 10, we want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, and peace. This damn near could have been written over lunchtime just now, right? I'm a member of the Black Speculative Arts Movement, which is an organization that is philosophizing, theorizing, traveling internationally, thinking about what our future looks like through philosophy and theory, right? Jumping ahead of the constantly responding to a current or to a past, but actually going to that future to plan that future. And what does that look like? And it's a international movement right now. We have some really awesome collaborators in Brazil and various countries in Africa. It's amazing what we've been doing since 2016. 2020. The country was literally on fire. Many cities across the world were on fire, literally. Galleries were reaching out to me to respond. I created a billboard series called Black Matters, hashtag Black Matters. And inside the middle of the hashtag, it would be Black Creativity Matters, Black Lives Matter, Black Family Matters. And I created 12 images with this prompt. So it were billboards. They were image and text. If you were driving by, you might be able to catch the text. But if you were walking by, you actually could absorb the image, right? And it was nice to hear. My mother went to visit every one of them with her friend, and people stopped there as she's looking at this, and she was striking up conversations with people. And it was like, this is exactly what I wanted to happen with the work. This is awesome. So if you look at, for example, well, this first piece here, Black Freedom Matters, that is a black man doing what? The top piece there. What reference is that? Woo! Come on now. All right, that's a Fanon reference, Frantz Fanon reference. Y'all get it. All right. So imagine, though, this piece in the middle here is called Black Family Matters, right? What I wanted the audience to do was to be able to say, well, this isn't my family. How would I draw my family? Let's talk about family. What does family mean? Let's define this. How are we thinking about family? These were prompts. All of my artwork are prompts, right? But if you notice, it's a comic aesthetic, right? I grew up in comics, I collect comics, I read comics, not enough comics, don't write enough about comics. But comics, the aesthetic is still a major influence of how I'm thinking about politics now. This is Megascope from, shouts out, we were talking about John Jennings a moment ago. John Jennings is the curator of Megascope, which is a line of books through Abrams Comic Arts. And Across the Tracks was one of the first books to drop through Megascope. It is a telling, shouts out to Alverne Ball, the writer, it is a telling of the Tulsa Race Massacre and Rebuild. I like to add that part, rebuild, because they did rebuild the community, and we don't talk about that enough. These are my process images for one of the pages, right? I'm drawing on the iPad Pro, sketching out really roughly on one label, doing what is called full inks on another, pardon me, drawing sketches on one layer, not labeled, one layer. And then over that, I'm doing full inks on another layer, right? I'm treating it like a comic page. And then shouts out to my son, who I will show you pictures of later, who helped to color this book. He was a primary color artist on this book, along with 2 of my students. And we knocked this book out 50 pages in like 2 months. It was incredible. And we dropped it by the anniversary of the centennial, which was May 31st and June 1st, 2021. At this time, I had to begin to create a theoretical map of my thoughts, because as you can see, my thoughts are like, they're in a lot of places, right? I literally had to write down how I'm thinking, right? So I took like a couple of days and I made what I call a cosmogram, a mind map, a theoretical cosmogram. I'm not expecting you to read this, right? But I just want to, I want you to understand how I'm starting to think. So in the center of this, the nucleus of this is myself. Extending from that are major influences to how I think, like the 12 jewels from the 5% nations of gods and earths, right? In order for us to have love, peace, and happiness, we must first begin with knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. The 5 primary elements of hip hop, there have been more defined. I start with the 5 primary ones. And then the Nguza Saba, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, as major influences as well to my thought. And through this, my self-centered, I'm thinking about my family, my descendants, elders, and ancestors. For example, community, and what community means all the way down to I'm thinking about education and mentorship, my calling versus my job, and some other things as well. The way I think about this is these points are all malleable, right? So my goal with this as an art project in the future is to create this in a virtual reality setting, or where people can actually take frameworks of my thought and combine them with other things and then see the reactions in other areas. What happens if you put DJing next to knowledge, for example, or DJing next to Kuja Chakalia, right, which is self-determination? What happens when you start to move these things around? I'm thinking about these things. So I want to create this as a space where people can figure this out. I started collaborating with the community a lot. This was my exhibition started to become collaborations with people in the community. This is Future Spaces and Community Places, where we started to think about the needs of the community as an Afrofuturist framework, right? These, and 3 of the collaborators, well, one of them was John Jennings. This piece in the middle is a Black Kirby image, one of our funky totems. The very first piece you see there is a piece called The Portal, and that is a collage with a really good friend of mine, Kamal Grantham, who is also a DJ and collage artist. We lived in 4 of the same cities. 2 of them are like at the same time. It was very interesting. Like, we think we remember each other from parties like 30 years ago. It was really, we're like, dude, yo, we have so many overlaps. We need to make work together. He's an amazing artist. The last piece is a collaborative piece with a community activist and poet named Shea Robinson. And this is us working through the aesthetics of what her children's book and activity book would look like. And the book is called Stargazer. And these are 3 books that were talked about earlier that Black Kirby created. So Kid Code is one of our characters. I need to go back to that book. Embarrassing that I didn't finish that book. I Am Alfonso Jones, which we talked about in the prison industrial complex for beginners. These are some images from the Stargazer project, including the logo. And I created a Stargazer team. Stargazer is about a little girl who is finding her self-esteem through ancestry and through writing in her journal. And along with her friends, if you see these characters at the bottom here, the pencil and the eraser, the gold stars and the notebook are her companions to help her build her self-esteem through journaling. Black Mal is Kamal Grantham and I, DJ, collage artist, is looking at surrealism through the inspiration of music and what that can mean. And this is very interesting because Kamal makes work and he's like, I don't know, I was just feeling it, so I made it. And I'm like, okay, I'm trying to interpret and write about our work in these ways. And it's fun collaborating with him because he's very intuitive with how he makes work. And sometimes I feel like I'm maybe too intentional, right? So he knows how to be more minimal. I feel like I'm too detailed. So we make a really good balance of how we're figuring out some things. This first piece here is it's called Black Boy on the Other Side of Time. It is an image of George Stinney Jr., the youngest person to ever be executed, publicly executed. He was 14 years old, and he was killed via electric chair. And like, he was so small, they had to stack him on books in order to kill him, right? I imagine him, so if you notice his crown is the Deep Space Nine space station, right? And that's a crown, right? With this red, black, green smoke emanating from his crown with this electricity as well. But I gave him these kind of Kumo D shade style shades. If you know who George Stinney Jr. is, you may recognize that picture of him. If you don't, it's okay. I'm trying to hide him, but not necessarily hide him. But it's called Black Boy on the Other Side of Time. And I thought if I could hide George Stinney Jr. in a place where he would be safe, it literally would be what Sun Ra calls on the other side of time. Right? To this Star Trek future where there is no racism, no sexism, no classism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want to get to Gene Roddenberry's future. I was pissed with Gene Roddenberry because he didn't tell us how to make that future. But the genius of Gene Roddenberry is that he did not tell us how to make that future. I'm still pissed at him, but he's a genius. I'm like, I hate you, but I love you, right? This second piece here is called Her Mind Spins, or a selection of her thoughts. Where's a DJ that's spinning 2 records on top of, like, she's wearing, this woman is wearing a turntable, and this DJ is literally spinning 2 records at the same time, right? Which is a selection of her thoughts. These are some other surreal images from our current work. Once again, this is what comics are birthing these thinkings, right? I'm a collage artist, but these are really comic inspired. I'm inspired by comics, but I'm also inspired by, quote, fine art, right? Collage art. How many of you know who artist Dave McKean is? Oh, yes. More hands need to be up. Check out Dave McKean. You probably will see his influences in my work as well. One of my favorites. This is interesting. These 5 banners are hanging. They're hanging like these banners at these standards. I crafted this so people could stand in the middle of it, 6 feet apart, and one person could stand directly in the center of this and hear what this Black surrealist liberation space sounds like. And it's a mix by DJ Kamal Kamal Grantham, my collaborator. You could look at these pieces from the outside, but once you went on the inside, there were 5 other very unique pieces. And you could literally stand in the center, and I'm like, what does a Black liberated future sound like? That's what we're figuring out through this practice. This piece is called In the Sunshine. This is one of our pieces from the first collection of works that we made in 2019. We typically make a body of work like once a year. And this piece here is Black kids swimming in the sun, literally swimming on the surface of the sun. And this was inspired by the Karen movement, right? There is this time, if you remember, there was a moment, it hasn't gone away, right? And it's always existed in our culture, where when Black people are having fun, white people call the police on us, right? Report us for having fun. And I started to think about, well, where can Black people where can we be safe? And I was like, shit, excuse me, I'm not supposed to cuss, excuse me. On the surface of the sun, right? All right, on the surface of the sun. So this is a God figure sprinkling in gold dust into the surface of the sun where these black kids can swim, and nobody else has access to them. There's a lot of murder and death in Champaign every summer. A lot of black boys killing other black boys. And I started working with black boys a lot more. And to the point where when I heard of a death, I had to check to make sure it wasn't somebody that I had worked with just the week before. Imagine what I can do to your psyche, right? I had to respond to the death that I was seeing. There was one boy, right before I made this piece, there was this one boy I met, a friend of mine's son. He was 14. All three of his best friends had just been sent to jail for murder, and they were all 19 and under. And I'm like, what is this 14-year-old boy who fortunately was not caught up in this, what is he thinking? How is he feeling, et cetera? I literally had to make art to respond to how I was feeling. This is a piece about a black boy being caught in the fraction of a second of a liminal moment. Is this a black boy losing his life? Is this a black boy emerging to his greatness, realizing his ultimate potential? What is this? I literally had to freestyle this drawing that I don't think I ever finished. I had to create, I had to respond. The medium of comics, the aesthetic of comics helps me think through that. I had to create images of black boys being beautiful, right? How often are black boys ever told that we are beautiful? How often are we told that? I had to make images. This is a piece here of a black father holding his two sons. And it reminded me, I have two children, and it reminded me of the personalities of my son and my daughter. They are total opposites, right? Total opposites. But my son is a massive geek. I'll show you pictures of him later. But as a father, I was in this moment where all I wanted to do was hug them and keep them safe. And in the summer of 2020, I was feeling like I could not keep them safe. I went through this moment where I realized I was not scared to die. I wasn't prepared to die because I could not keep my children safe. And yet this world was so horrible that they did not deserve the awesomeness, the genius of my children, right? I was going through a moment and I had to create work. That led to curation. I've been, as I'm doing shows, I was asked to start curating conversations. This was Ascension of Black Stillness was a photo-based exhibition that looked at black speculative or Afrofuturist imaginings through still photography, right? So some of them were videos, but some of them were images. And it was interesting to curate this because in the COVID era, I was able to help put money in the pockets of artists. And the show is split literally 50-50 between men and women. And I was very proud to be able to say I'm gonna have 50% men, 50% women in this show and put money in their pockets in the COVID era. And this is some images of the opening. It might be a little blurry. Hopefully you can make that out. I just wanted to show it. It was an amazing opening. It was super duper awesome. And that was at SEPA Gallery in Buffalo, New York. All right. And then there was, I'll close out in a moment. And then there was the Carnegie Hall Afrofuturism Festival this past February and March. I was honored to be a part of. I was still thinking about images of black boys. This first piece here is this piece called God Forbid. And it was inspired by a black boy that I knew. He's about 15 years old, I want to say, maybe 15. He might have been 17. He was a high school student. He had a baby on the way, right? And it was interesting because I was working with these groups of boys who literally, by the end of high school, they might not be alive. So it was important for them to leave their legacy in the world as a teenager by creating babies. I mean, imagine that you're thinking about, I might not be here, I have to make babies now to secure my legacy. Are they thinking about it on that deep level with that level of verbalization? I have no idea, right? But they're doing this. And this other piece is called Earth Seed. This is an image. Imagine that the earth is going to get rid of us, get tired of us, and get rid of us. But there will be a remnant left. And I imagine this seed of this black woman with the perfect environment would be in this seed, where when the earth, like, how it decides that we are able to occupy her again, would open this seed, and then everything needed to start civilization again would be inside this seed. I did a project with the Sundance Film Festival. This is really awesome. And the prompt was interesting. I'd never gotten a prompt like this. It was, if money was not an object, if you had all the money you could ever need, what type of art would you make? Would political art matter? It took me a long time to think about this. Then I realized, I'm like, well, having all the money in the world doesn't mean that black people are free. So, in order to gain freedom, I thought about the Nguzo Saba as a system, right? The 7 principles of Kwanzaa as a system, but I thought about that also as the Middle Passage. This is why you see the Nguzo Saba represented through these waves in this water. This is for a future animation project that I'm working on. This is a new piece. This is an animation. This is still image, but I'm creating this as an animation for a really awesome band called Mwenzo and the Shakes, MWENSO and the Shakes. Look them up, they're incredible. I'm making this image for them. They're coming to our campus. I wanted to create an image to celebrate them. And it's very abstracted, and I'm not necessarily really sure what it means, but I wanted to just kind of respond as I was listening to their music. We talked about Miles Morales earlier, so definitely gonna, shout out one of my favorite artists. I was a Nasir Jones fellow. This is a picture of one of my favorite hip hop artists, Nasir Jones as Miles Morales, or as the Amazing Spider-Man in that last image. This is for an essay that I'm writing right now, a visual essay that's looking at the connections between comics and hip hop and original samples, how I'm thinking about this. And of course I'm connecting this to Nas and Spider-Man because he has a lyric that goes, Nas is like the Afrocentric Asian, half man, half amazing Spider-Man, right? All right, yes, I am a DJ and burgeoning beat maker. It's how I keep my sanity. And it is also how I think about the collage of world culture. Hip hop is created out of the collaging of world culture. We don't have hip hop without the blues, or without German electronic music, or without punk music, and without R&B or 80s pop, etc. And I spin all of this on vinyl to really show the amazing culture that is one of the #1 cultures in the world, but is created through this world culture, but also born out of the apocalypse. If you look at hip hop coming out of the protests of Jamaica into the South Bronx, and what was happening in the South Bronx in the late 60s and early 70s, the Bronx was literally on fire, right? As black and brown people were being displaced, landlords were literally burning down their buildings in order to gain the insurance money. But hip hop was born out of this struggle. I was also cooking a lot and documenting my food. And it was important that I be accountable with my food to my audience. I thought this was Afrofuturist too. And so I was starting to share recipes. And it was interesting. I literally had an audience of people who followed me on social media because they followed my recipes. I'm like, I'm not a chef. But it was interesting to check my DMs, and people would say, hey, listen, I lost this amount of weight, or I cooked this week, and I want to thank you for your recipe. I'm like, I'm not a chef, but I was trying to drop this weight and literally deal with my health publicly. So I got a prostate exam. My mother was like, yo, prostate cancer runs in our family. We lost Chadwick Boseman to prostate cancer. You need to get checked. I'm like, okay, yes, ma'am, I will go do that. Like, my mother told me to go do this. And I'm like, let me listen to my mama, right? So I went and got one. And I'm like, well, Mom, they do the A1C test. She was like, nope, I want you to get the finger check. So I was like, okay. So I went to my doctor and got this done, right? I was like, oh, okay, hey, doc, you know. But I shared this experience on Facebook Live because I wanted to kind of destroy that idea that, hey, black people don't go to the doctor. We need to go get checked, right? Don't be scared of the doctor putting his fingers, you know, doing what the doctor has to do. Like, and I shared this experience. I'm like, this was not horrible at all, right? So I started sharing this publicly. I also started growing plants and learning how to garden. Shaya told me a few years ago, she was like, you need to love something that can't love you back. I thought I was like, damn, that is deep, right? Plants do love you back. They give you vegetation to live. But I killed all of my plants. I was horrible. But let me tell you, I did not give up, right? Actually, Shaya gave me another plant that is still alive. And she was like, okay, I'm gonna give you this plant. All you gotta do is give it water. It's fine. Like, you cannot kill this. And it's still alive. But I'm gonna tell you, this started my practice of gardening. And last summer, I gardened and I ate fresh fruit out of my garden. Not fruit, pardon me, fresh vegetables out of my garden. I promise you, I tasted spinach that was so fresh, I didn't even know what it was. I'm like, this doesn't taste like what comes out of the store at all. It was amazing to take food right out of my garden, wash it off, of course, eat it immediately, and get a jolt like I had an espresso. I was like, yo, what is that? Oh, that's nutrients, you know, that's the garden. That is Afrofuturist. I started documenting my workouts and everything, right? This is Afrofuturist. So what's next for me? I'm prioritizing my mental health. I got a therapist, right? And I started talking about this live on Facebook as well. Got a therapist. What's next for me is dealing with my mental health and my spiritual health and finding the balance between all of these things in my art practice and documenting this. My graphic novel proposals and exhibitions. I'm going to execute my graphic novel proposals through art exhibitions because I realize I'm an exhibition artist, but I got to get these comics out. How do I solidify the intellectual property in the pitch for my agent? Do it in the art gallery where I'm at all the time anyway. And remember that my purpose is to establish my philosophy and theory by creating multimedia art that inspires us to create, all of us to create free and equitable futures for all people, beginning with black people first. I started going back to the aesthetics of comics though too. This first piece is a piece inspired by the Will Smith, Chris Rock moment, right, of the Oscars. And as people laughed and joked and created memes around this, I did not find anything funny about this at all. Will Smith had a public breakdown, and he took it out on his peer. And I believe he took it out on a person he thought could take this pain. I'm not saying everybody else looked at it this way. This is the way I saw this. Like, this was a cry for help to someone he saw as a peer. Right? So I created this piece, and this is a piece in progress, of two black men hugging and healing themselves, but they are the center of the universe, right? How is black male healing centered as the center of the universe? Because black women tell us all the time, y'all need to get y'all stuff together before y'all come to us with y'all problems. We are not here to fix y'all problem. So I was like, you know what? What does that look like when black men get together and heal ourselves? What does that look like? Started creating images around that. Second piece is a story. I started creating these one-image stories. I'm creating an image that I'll write a story about. This is a nebula and a star fell in love in their first kiss. And then the third piece is, what does the Black Unlimited imagination look like? So once again, I'm thinking about the sensory aesthetics as what does our healing Afrofuturist food taste like? What does that healing look like? And then how am I defining freedom? I'm starting to define this and really think about this through a liberation artistic practice inspired by comics, inspired by fine art, and of course my record collection, my DJ collection. And once again, in closing, if white supremacy is a philosophy backed by a system of racism that leads to design, and that's an algorithm, what does our liberation look like as an algorithm? And I was going to close out. Shouts out to Frederick Aldama, who talked about Miles Morales. This is my son, Solomon, my firstborn. He's about to be 24. In high school, he would cosplay, right? He would get requests, hey, can you come to school as Goku today? So this is him with Cloud is, what's Cloud is Final Fantasies, right? This is him with a Cloud wig on in a Goku suit, right? I call him Broku, right? But when he graduated, my gift to him was this Miles Morales costume. I took him to Comic-Con a few years ago. It was an amazing year. That year, a book that he had worked on got an Eisner Award. Right? And that's like, he's gotten others actually for books he's worked on, right? Not him getting it, but it was really awesome that the books that he works on are in the Met, for example, in the period room, the Afrofuturist period room. Like he's working on books that get amazing awards. He's an actor and a cosplayer, right? And this is him at his first comic convention, San Diego Comic-Con, and literally there was this moment where like 3 Spider-Man, Spider-Woman characters came together in the center of this room. They were like, and they started posing and doing this, and there was a crowd of people that came around them. This was an amazing moment where I saw my son kind of emerge with his self-esteem. At first he was shy, he didn't really want to like walk around, and this little kid was like, oh my God, you're Spider-Man. And he was like this. I said, son, I'm like, listen, you're not Solomon Robinson. You're Miles Morales. You're Spider-Man. This is all this kid sees. And to see my son emerge and his self-esteem to grow through cosplay and through theater was a very beautiful moment. Thank you very, very much. Right. So I imagine there's a few minutes for Q&A. All right, awesome. Any comments, thoughts, questions, or whatever? Of course you have. Yes. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for that talk. Thank you so much for that talk and the work that you do at so many different levels, especially in a time when there's a censorship of our histories and a fear of Black liberation. So everything from your exhibits that you curate, the graphic novels that you do. Thank you for all of that. I have an artist question, though.
Yeah.
So in your collage work, the sort of musicality is really at the forefront.
Yeah.
But I also see it in your comics and your line art.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering, and you have this background as a DJ and you're an album collector. Are there aesthetic choices that you make in your comics and your line art to present or to represent a sense of musicality and performativity? So does that come out of line choices, the textures that you choose, the colors? What are some of those aesthetic choices that you make to bring out that musicality and performativity in your work to make these still images that you create come alive and they appear as in 3D dimensions, even though they're not? So yeah, I'm just interested in your aesthetic choices to bring that out. Thanks.
That's an interesting question because I never know what an image is going to look like when it's done. I don't ever see a complete image. I only see a fraction of an image. And I have to start creating from that fraction. And literally it's a freestyle. Like every moment of it is a freestyle of some sort. To the point where I showed you some of the I showed you the sketchiness, right? I will go to full inks from that. There's a joy in the freestyle, right? Even when I'm collaging, I'm freestyling. I don't always know what images I'm going to collage and what I'm going to add to it. If I did, it would be complete to me, and I wouldn't make it, because in my head, I would already see it. I have to see it in part and make it as part of the journey. So if any of you know what the hero's journey is, anybody know? Yeah, right? Joseph Campbell talks about this really awesomely. If you don't know, look it up, and it will change your life. You will understand like so much more about life from understanding the hero's journey and our place in the world too. But if I had it all, I wouldn't make it. So for me, even when I create a DJ set, I'll put songs together. I might practice a set, my scratches and transitions, but I've never created the perfect set. Never. And I think for DJs or musicians, there's this thing about chasing the perfect set, right? I've never made the perfect art piece, and I'm chasing that. I've not figured out the connections between my love of music and my artwork and exhibition practice and how I think politically. I've not made those connections. And I went to Harvard to do this, right? And I just came out with so many more questions. I didn't come out with any answers, right? I came out with so many more questions, though. It was great for Cornell West to be able to ask me, you know, brother, I see this future, like you're drawing, brother, how do we make it? If Cornell West, one of my favorite like philosophers, right, is thinking about, if that's the question he has for me, I see this future you're drawing, it's so opulent, so beautiful, how do we make this thing? I know I'm on the right path. I'm figuring that out too, and I don't have it all together, literally, right? I'm sharing this with you now, and I don't have it together. I don't know. But if I had it all together, I wouldn't make it. I wouldn't care to. You know, does that make sense? It's a process thing as an artist, but that's the process. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
Thank you so much for bringing the full cosmos of yourself to this presentation, and I loved it. But I just wanted to, okay, can you hear me better?
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, because you started with the algorithmic, right?
Yeah.
And then at some point you mentioned Gene Roddenberry, Star Trek, right?
Yeah.
And you were talking about how he didn't give us the full algorithm. He gave us a vision.
I gave us a vision, right.
But it was up to us to create it,
Yeah.
right? And so what I'm wondering is like...
This
I
comes
think-
from Gene Roddenberry's vision.
So-
Literally, right?
so
this
what-
is a tricorder. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is the element of the non-algorithmic in liberation? Because systems of oppression are algorithmic.
Yep.
You can get them started, and then they'll just run because the money runs the system, and then
Right.
it goes on. So what can you do that is non-algorithmic, that puts the black soul imprint on the liberation? Do you get my question? I want to see the non-algorithmic in what you've done is clear, but what do you mean by algorithmic?
I mean exactly what I said before, as in I am looking to develop a philosophy that becomes a theory of practice, right, that can turn into a system that I probably will not be able to really test in the next, I don't know how many years I have left on this planet. I'm probably past my halfway mark, right? But the next generation will be able to pick up and play with and figure out. But here's the thing with this, right? The work that I make might not be what the future needs. I'm probably gonna leave thousands of art pieces, right, in the world. They literally might say, all of this is BS. This is outdated. We don't think like this anymore. He made this one piece here, or wrote this one essay, right, or this one paragraph, and this is the only thing we need from him. The non-algorithmic, I would have to, it's interesting because if I think about music, right, let's say it's a physical thing, but it's actually built on an algorithm, right? There's a science to creating music. I don't know anything that's not. Color theory is an algorithm, right? Design is an algorithm. Like graphic design, the elements and principles of design are an algorithm. I don't know many things that aren't. I'd have to really think about that. But I would say that I think it is in the algorithm where we find this, and it's not just the complexity of the things I'm thinking about. It's the 4-count beat of house music. It is that, right? And once you know that algorithm, if that beat changes on an 8, you know the song's gonna change on a 16, right? If it changes on a 16, you know it's gonna change, that beat is gonna change on a 32. Once you have the algorithm, and I love thinking about it like through house music, right? Because of how you can mix easily with house music, right? And it represents for me this way of collaging these various cultures together in order to create something new. I think in many ways that is not the complexity of the algorithm, is what we do naturally as people. We create culture and we share it, right? But I'm always concerned about how we share culture and we're not always free through culture, right? The world, hip hop is going, breakdance is going to the Olympics. How many of us are going to be involved in that? you see what I'm saying? How many of us are going to be Olympiads going to breakdance in the Olympics, right? And what does that mean for us culturally? I don't know if that addresses it or not. That's a great question, though. I'm not sure if I answered your question, though. Yeah, we could definitely talk about that. It looks like we're probably past our time. Yeah? Oh, yeah? Oh, we're good? Oh, hey, listen, I'm here. Okay, I drove 3.5 hours to get here. I'm good. I'm staying. I'm staying here. All right. And I definitely want to share some other thoughts, too, but I want to make sure we get the Q&A in. Mm-hmm.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation. I just wanted to know, as you know, as a college student, I'm looking forward and thinking about my career, and you seem to have taken a lot of your great ideas and beliefs and put them towards your career and made value out of your values, if you understand what I mean.
Yep. How do you do that?
I wanted to ask, not how you do that, what your motivations were and what your inspiration was to ensure that your values turned into your career.
Yeah. One, I'm obsessed. I cannot. The beautiful thing is, how many of you have been so obsessed you've been awoken at night with an idea and you can't sleep, right? Yeah, a lot of hands go up because that's happened to a lot of us. How many of you actually get up and write that down? See, not every hand goes up, right? I like to say it like this. People ask me, how do you do what you do? I tell them, I'll be honest, I say, you know what? I'm smart enough to write down God's vision that he gives me or that she gives me. That's my genius. I'm smart enough to write the ideas down when they come to me, right? I'm smart enough to execute them. I'm smart enough to figure it out. We all get the calling. How many of us answer the calling? I know I'm called. I know that I'm called. I don't want to sound arrogant, but y'all see the dopeness, right? Like, this shit is ill, right? I look at myself and be like, sometimes I cuss myself out. I'm like, you dope as a man, right? I know that I'm called, but I'm humbled enough to know that this work is beyond me. I'm grasping for it. I put it down. Literally, I have questions, and I make things sometimes, and I don't know what it means until I make it. Literally. How many of you have ever experienced that, right? Exactly, right? Like, I'm not crazy. I'm like, I don't know what this means until I make it, but I have to make it in order to figure out what it is. That's not me. That's coming through me. I'm smart enough to write that down, right? So because of that obsession, because I can't sleep at night, because I know my calling, I'm aiming for that. But I'm also 50, right? I want to get this out of me before I leave here, right? I got to get this out of me. And I think that I'm always searching. Like, so yes, I just became associate professor, right? Full professor sitting right there. I want it. Like, I'm not done. I'm always hungry. I'm always chasing. I'm always figuring out what is the next exhibition? What is my next practice? How do I, like, one of my goals, for example, I'll tell you this, like, maybe some of y'all can help me figure it out. I want to turn the art gallery into a space of healing where literally you could come into the art gallery, you can hear the perfect simulation of beats, literally, that would cure a person of cancer. I want to figure that algorithm out. How does that happen through the perfect, what's the word? I'm blanking on a word. synthesis of music and art and whatever else happens to happen in that place, so that if a person came in, and I'm not trying to be callous when I say this, but if a person was dying of cancer and they came in and they could be healed in the art space, I figured out the meaning of life, right? Like, that's what I'm aiming for. So to answer that question, that's what I'm chasing. As broad as fantastic as that might sound, to me it's a science. If I can think about that, that thing actually exists. I'm chasing that. So the things that come along the way are awesome. I guess awesome to be a professor, like getting to travel and do what I do, hanging out with my friends, shouts out to Frederick here, right? For example, getting to hang out here and do these awesome things with people, right? That's wonderful, but that is not what I'm chasing. I'm not chasing the professor, right? I wasn't chasing that. I'm chasing this other thing. I'm really trying to like figure out how to heal us from things that shouldn't even exist in our culture, right? You know what I mean? Another thing I'm going to add is when I think about liberation, every free nation of people have 6 things that define them in a particular way as a nation. They have sovereign, this is every free nation of people. They have sovereign land. They have a government that legislates their sovereignty. They have a military that defends their sovereignty. They have a form of money for global commerce and trade. They have their own language system. And I like to do this and say, lastly, their God looks like them. When I think about black people across the diaspora, how many of these things do we have that allow us to define ourselves as a nation, right? And I like to think of black people across the diaspora as a nation, because I think we need to at least have those types of conversations. How are we globally as a people? And I like to think about that in the simplest ways. When the police pull us over, they don't do a survey. Click, clack, hey, how you doing? I'm gonna kill you. But before I do, I'm taking a survey. What is your gender and sexuality? What is the highest level of your education? What is your religious affiliation? When police pull us over, what is that term called? Say it, y'all know it. Racial profiling. Racial profiling, right? They don't take a survey on these other marginalizations that we get caught up in. This is why I focus on black liberation. I don't focus on gender and sexuality. I don't focus on class. And I find that too many smart black people are avoiding the topic of blackness and defining what that means with these other intersections. We are always black first before our gender. We can argue that, that's fine. I don't argue that. But I will entertain the conversation if people do that. People say, well, I'm queer and I'm black too, and it's both the same. I would not argue that, but I cannot argue what you live, right? I always say that we're black first. And this government doesn't care because guess what? Queer people make babies too. And they are fighting what is called their genetic annihilation. This is why white people are battling. You could see this on television every day. You could see this when our country is becoming blacker and browner, right? And the fear, we saw this in the Trump era. We saw the rhetoric, right? We have to really have honest conversations around what blackness looks like as nationhood. The other thing is Afrofuturism aesthetics are popular culture right now, right? Shouts out, Black Panther 2 is about to drop in November, right? Crazy, I'm there for that. Here's the thing, shows like Lovecraft Country, right? Even Star Wars, we have Finn in Star Wars, right? We wanted to see him with the, become a Jedi. What the heck happened with that story? That was a crap show, right? But the Afrofuture aesthetics or black and brown people in the future is popular culture right now. The way that I like to craft and think about the future is through the lens of Afrofuturism, right? I think there's something very powerful in the fact that black imaginings are cool. What do we do with that? This is a moment that we're in, and we better capture the moment, before it passes us, right? And that's a play on Eminem's "Lose Yourself." I'm paraphrasing one of his lyrics there. Right? Capture this moment and hope it doesn't pass, right? Anyone else? If not, thank you. I will be around. I know y'all got to flood me with questions and stuff. If you want to see the iPad and see some awesome stuff, come check me out in the back. Thank you.